Okay, picture this. It's the mid-1980s in Paris. A shadow has fallen over the city, especially over the beautiful winding streets of Montmartre. Elderly women are being found murdered in their own homes, the victims of a brutal and what seems like a totally random killer. Fear is gripping the city, but the man behind it all is a ghost. Today, we're going to unmask the man who became known as the Monster of Montmartre.
This is him. This is Thierry Paulin. But to the world, and especially to the terrified people of Paris, he would be known by a much more chilling name, the Monster of Montmartre. His story is just the shocking mix of glamorous Parisian nightlife, horrifying violence, and desperate acts that left a trail of terror right across the city.
So to really understand how Paulin earned that monstrous reputation, we first have to look at the chilling facts of his crimes.
And the scale here, it is just staggering. Between 1984 and 1987, Paulin was responsible for at least 18 murders, though he himself would later claim it was 21. For 3 solid years, he terrorized the elderly population of France's capital before he was finally caught. So who was this guy, and where on earth did he come from?
Well, the path that led Thierry Paulin to Paris actually began thousands of miles away, on the Caribbean island of Martinique, and his troubled childhood there would really set the stage for a life of crime.
So, born back in 1963, Paulin had a really rough start. He was raised by his grandmother, did terribly in school, and ended up joining the military at just 17. That's what sent him to mainland France, and it was there in 1982 that the pattern we'd see again and again began with his first conviction for robbing an elderly woman in her own grocery store.
After leaving the military, Paulin moves to Paris and finds a whole new life in the city's vibrant nightlife. He's working as a waiter in a nightclub, famous for its drag shows, and he even gets up on stage himself, impersonating his idol, the singer Eartha Kitt. It was this life of performance and parties, a world away from the darkness that was quietly brewing inside him.
And it was in this glittering, nocturnal world of Parisian clubs that Paulin met the person who would become his accomplice, the one who would help transform his violent tendencies into a full-blown murder spree.
So in the club scene, Paulin meets Jean-Thierry Mathurin, a 19-year-old drug addict. They became lovers, and pretty soon they were partners in crime. Paulin was the charismatic leader, the one in charge, with Mathurin as his devoted and, as it turns out, equally violent follower. Together, they kicked off their first spree in October of 1984. Their method was horrifyingly simple. They target elderly women, charm their way inside their apartments, and then attack. The violence was just extreme: asphyxiation, beatings, and in some cases, victims were forced to drink drain cleaner. And the motive? Robbery, all to pay for the extravagant lifestyle they were chasing.
But the money they got from these brutal attacks, it was just shockingly trivial. One victim, an 83-year-old woman named Anna Barbe-Ponthis, was murdered for just 300 francs. That's about $50 today. A human life, snuffed out for pocket change.
This just shows you the chilling disconnect in their lives. By day, they were predators, stalking the city's most vulnerable people, and by night, they'd use that stolen money to find this crazy lifestyle, drinking champagne and doing drugs in the very same city they were terrorizing.
Now, after that initial spree, the partners in crime actually separated. Mathurin left Paris, and for a while, the killing stopped. But, this story was far from over. A new, even more terrifying chapter was about to begin, and it was sparked by a diagnosis that Paulin saw as a death sentence.
For most people, a fatal diagnosis is a tragedy. For Thierry Paulin, it became a catalyst. It fueled a second, even more terrifying wave of murders.
So, while he was serving a brief prison sentence for some other assault, Paulin learned he was HIV positive. You have to remember, this is the 1980s. This was, for all intents and purposes, a death sentence. And for Paulin, it basically ignited what's been described as a race against time to kill as many as possible.
So after his release, he started killing again, only this time he was all alone. He killed another 8 women, perfectly matching the victim count of his first spree with Mathurin. But this time, the police noticed a change. The murders were quicker, and according to the reports, less cruel. It was almost as if he was working against his own ticking clock.
But that ticking clock wasn't just for Paulin. His final attack would set in motion a chain of events that would finally bring his reign of terror to an end. And it was all thanks to one woman's incredible will to survive.
So on November 25, 1987, Paulin attacks an 87-year-old woman named Bertha Fanoteri. He beat her, suffocated her, and left her for dead. But miraculously, she survived. When she recovered, she gave the police the one thing they had been missing for 3 years: a clear, detailed description of the killer. Just a week later, an inspector spotted Paulin on the street and arrested him on the spot.
And this was the description that ended it all. It was so specific, so unmistakable. A mixed-race man in his 20s with hair like Carl Lewis and an earring in his left ear. It was so precise that the inspector who recognized him knew in that instant that the Monster of Montmartre's time was up.
And once he was in custody, the whole facade just crumbled. There was no denial, no resistance. Within 48 hours, Thierry Paulin confessed to absolutely everything: his first spree with Mathurin and the second wave of killings he did all on his own.
But here's the final twist. The Monster of Montmartre would never actually face a jury. In early 1988, his health just started to fail due to AIDS-related illnesses. He died in a prison hospital wing on April 16, 1989. His accomplice, Jean-Thierry Mathurin, he was eventually tried, sentenced to life, and then actually released in 2009.
And that leaves us with a final, really unsettling question. Paulin was officially accused of 18 murders, but he confessed to 21, and because he died before his trial, the full truth was never really tested in court. So we're just left to wonder, who were those other victims, and what other secrets about his horrifying reign died with him in that prison cell?